feminist. A person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes.
Feminism is a very controversial topic in 21st century. Whether it's fighting for equality in the workplace, reproductive rights, equal pay, or sexual violence, feminism is a movement with a strong message. However, many believe that it's exclusive only to women. I decided to see what men, representatives of different waves of feminism with different backgrounds and knowledge on the topic, have to say about it. For months, I was looking for men who have great experiences with feminism and were willing to share their stories with me, until I found Neil Davidson, Stephen Cross, and Darren Kilbride. To learn more about the history of feminism and its academic side, I met with Neil Davidson, a sociology lecturer at Glasgow University and a feminism supporter.
When I was growing up, we were in the middle of the second wave feminism in the late 60s and early 70s. And so when I was in my late teens, that was the first generation of women really who had come through all that and weren't prepared to put up with the kind of things that maybe their mothers or grandmothers were prepared to put up with. So I've kind of lived with women who consider themselves feminists and gone out with them and, you know, and just learned what you should and shouldn't say and how you should behave. And politically became aware of that as well at the same time. But it's also about just the kind of relationships between men and women have changed over the years. I think generally have improved. As I've said, there's still these problems to be overcome, which will never be overcome until we deal with underlying economic issues. You identify by supporting an end to women's oppression. That seems to be the fundamental definition of what a feminist is. So anyone could call themselves a feminist if they were prepared to stand for equality and argue for that.
Darren Kilbride is a writer, theatre maker, director, and an activist. For the past few years, he's been to several marches. Last year alone, he's been to an anti-Trump march and a couple of different prides. He sat down with me for an interview to share his story and experiences with feminism.
I feel like I grew up with just my mum, so I feel like she was my first example / encounter with a strong woman. And for she is a feminist. She might not define herself as a feminist, but she was definitely my first example of feminism. I don't think it was ever a conscious decision of this moment, I am a feminist. I feel like it's always just something that has been ingrained within me. It was never really a question, it was always just, yeah, that seems right, that's what I am. My perception of feminism is equal opportunity for all sexes, period.
Stephen Cross is a lawyer and an equal pay campaigner. He's been fighting for equal pay for women in the last 30 years. We sat down for a Skype interview to talk about his views on contemporary feminism.
I was brought up in a family where my mother was subject to domestic violence and a really controlling father. And I saw her oppression. I also saw the jobs that she did and how she was undervalued. And I also did those jobs. So at a very early age, I was very conscious of the injustice that women like my mother were suffering. And I wanted to do something about it. And it sort of stayed with me for 40 years.
And what is your idea of feminism in 21st century?
It's still the same fight that feminism was fighting in the 20th century, which is to enable women to participate and have the same power as men on the same terms as men.
I think it's a healthy sign, that people have got back to these fundamental political questions. It started off being what feminism was about, and that's also partly, it's obviously tied up with things like Occupy and the kind of other movements that started in the 2000s against neoliberalism and against globalisation and so on. So I think that's accompanied it in the same way that the second wave feminism was tied in with the kind of revolutionary movements of the late 60s and the 70s as well. I'm seen as being part of them. I think fourth wave feminism, it's more disparate in terms of its political positions, but it's also tied in with the kind of those movements as well. People tend to be part of both.
Equal pay and gender pay gap are both problems feminism has been dealing with for decades. Whilst both deal with disparity in pay women receive in the workplace, they're both different issues. Statistics show that the pay gap is most significant in countries like Germany and Austria, and it's less significant in Italy and Slovenia. In Britain, there is an overall gender pay gap of 18.1%.
I think it's still traditional cultural reasons. I'll give you an example. My daughter works in the city in a big law firm, and they still have a toxic male masculinity culture. The things that the organisation values are the things that men have traditionally done, like working ludicrous hours, putting their job before their families, networking with other men in toxic environments. Those are very, very difficult things for women to break into that culture. So the organisation will tell you that they're gender neutral, that they are in favour of women's rights, but the reality is the culture doesn't facilitate the success of women, and that's replicated across a lot of industries. It's sometimes it's not overt, but it's sort of unbiased discrimination, but it all mounts up.
I do feel like it exists. It definitely exists. The problem is with day-to-day people like you and me, we won't necessarily see so blatantly the pay gap because it's more prominent, more present at a higher level. So you're talking about CEOs of company, people who run the business, that's where you see the majority of the pay gap. And it's that vast, the gap's that vast when it's that high up in the chain that it trickles down. And that's where you wouldn't necessarily see it affect us, but because it doesn't affect us doesn't mean it's not affecting women at different levels that are doing the same job and getting paid less money.
Look at the stats, and even though the gender pay gap stats are not very good, they do demonstrate that as soon as women start having children, the pay gaps get much, much bigger. So it's a combination of men having a stereotypical view of women, an entrenched culture that favours male attributes versus female attributes, and the lack of power of women to be able to change things at the moment.
Just like any movement, there are extremists in this one too. Many are accused of man-hating and oppressing men, rather than being equal to them. I asked all three of my interviews what are their views on the matter from the male perspective.
I feel like hate only produces hate. So if you have these men that believe that there's a movement that is solely based to exclude them and hate on them, then you're going to counteract that with the same feelings towards feminism and females.
No, I don't think that's a mainstream feminism. I mean, it's like any other social movement. There are extremes at each end, and there are some women that take the view that appear to be anti-men. I don't think that's mainstream. I think most mainstream feminists all they want is to be treated equally to the men. They don't want to oppress. They don't want to change oppression of women to oppression of men. They want to stop the oppression altogether.
There's really two things here. There's the question of women's situation in society, their oppression, their movements against it, and so on. And there's the question of political movements, of feminism as a political movement, or a series of movements which with different kind of emphases. I think this is one of the most ridiculous ideas imaginable, that men are being oppressed by women. What it is a few men, or a relatively small number of men, who are used to being able to sound off in anything they like and talk about women any way they want, and now they find that women won't put up with it. They're whimpering about how I'm oppressed, but it's just not serious at all. I think this is a very defensive reaction from ageing sexists who can't bear the fact that they're being called out for how they behave.
Well, media and social media actually is also a big part of women's emancipation nowadays. Would you say this is helping them, and this is like after all of the movements that started happening in 2017? Would you say that this is pushing women towards fighting for this?
Social media is really interesting because it has two sides. So there's a toxic side where social media can really sort of launch itself onto women in a really negative way. On the other hand, it does empower women in a way that they never had before. Glasgow is a really, really good example of how social media was used by the women to organise amongst themselves and get themselves over the line. The reason that we've got a recent settlement is because of the power of social media used by women for themselves. And there's another really good example. There's been a massive strike of teachers in Los Angeles, which has been going on for some months. That was also organised through a community social media campaign by the women and mothers and the community, and again, it was incredibly powerful. So you have these two sides of the coin: the toxic side, but also the empowerment going on at the same time. Generally, I think it's actually a really good thing, and it really does enable women to connect where they wouldn't otherwise connect.
I feel like, especially recently over the last couple of years, I noticed that social media was not necessarily being used as a positive stimulus. I felt like it was a fake perception of people's lives. So I made a conscious decision to make social media work for me and not work for social media. So I won't post anything unless I know it helps someone or helps promote something that I believe in. So I definitely use social media as means to give awareness to certain campaigns or promote certain things. I feel like the Me Too movement was sort of a defining moment. I feel like it's a moment that women won't let men or anybody brush away. There's been too much happening for too long, and I feel like this is going to give real change. It doesn't feel like it's going to lie down and forget about it. It's going to stand up and be remembered.
Another very big issue feminism has been battling with is sexism, especially sexism in highly dominated areas regardless of gender. To understand both sides, I decided to meet with people from two very different fields, football and ballet. I met up with David Woods, a football team manager who shared his thoughts on football as a very male-dominated area and its relation to feminism.
I got introduced to football from a young age. My grandfather played for Manchester United and I've always loved it. It's my passion, and I've coached for the last 5-6 years.
As the manager of the team, you pretty much have like the last say of who's going to be in the team. Would you ever choose a woman to participate?
Well, my girlfriend's a very active hockey player who would run a lot more than half of the team does. So, yeah, I would never rule it out. I don't know what the rules are on it. I don't imagine that it's possible for the level that we play at. I don't think it would mix in terms of, in the professional level, I don't think it would probably get to the level where you could play 11-a-side football and there'd be men and women. I don't see that being, I think there's too much of a differentiation between the genders to really actually make that work. You never know. But I would say with history tells you that probably wouldn't work, but you never know.
And what are your views of feminism nowadays in 21st century? How do you see it?
I think there's more equality than ever before. I think it can always get better. I think it depends on where you are in the world, to be honest, because I think in the UK we're very inclusive of women. For example, I work in an office where it's the majority is women, and it doesn't make a difference. So whoever's best for the job, it shouldn't depend on their gender. So.
It seems like there are many misconceptions about ballet, one of them being that ballet is only for girls. It is true that the industry is highly female-dominated, so does this make it pro-feminism? And can ballet exist without men? I spoke to ballet dancer and choreographer Louis Fukuhara.
I started dancing when I was 14 years old. I started back in Japan, and I wanted to be a musical actor, and I asked my teacher what to do, and she said I need to learn ballet in order to be able to be a professional musical theatre dancer and an actor at the same time, because both skills are very important. And I started ballet when I was 14. It was really fun, and I just loved it so much. Yeah. I was the only boy for 3 years, and then I invited my friend to come over. So from then, there was 3 boys in total, including myself. But for the first 3 years, I was the only guy in the whole school. And at first, it felt a little bit uncomfortable because it was my first time being in an environment that I had only girls around me, because I used to do baseball for 6 years and I started ballet after that. So it wasn't difficult, but it was a bit weird talking to girls all the time. But I quite enjoyed it because the girls were really open to me, because it's very rare for a guy to do ballet, especially in Japan. Ballet itself is open to both male and female, because it is a part of acting, and in the shows we both need guys and women, and it's equal to both men and women, because there's 2 different types of shoes, there's 2 different types of costume that we wear, and we both have equal chance to stand on stage. We have equal styles of dancing in the ballet, and I think we don't have one over the other. It's all equal. The teachers treat us equally, the choreography, the costume, everything is equal between men and women. For me, I don't understand why people say that men are over women or women are over men, because I feel like they're equal, like we're all human. We can do the same things, and I am against people who say one is over the other. Yeah.
To understand more in depth what fourth wave representatives think of modern feminism, I brought together 2 men and 2 women with different opinions on the movement to spark dialogue about their respective views in 21st century. May I have my men and women take a position?
Guys,
The feminist movement has changed from its original definition.
Yes, because I guess it encompasses a lot more, so a grander scale than that used to be, say, in the 20s and the 30s.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That was the beginning. There's also another point where, in the beginning, feminism kind of had a more specific thing that they were looking towards getting, which was exactly getting women to have more rights about pretty much everything that they wanted, that they've been oppressed before. But nowadays it has changed a lot. It's a lot different. The second and third wave is just, it's more about, in a way, not all of it, but it's oppressing men.
My name is Callum Brown. I am a film student. I'm 20 years old, and I decided to do this debate because it is something that I've noticed in social media, and I felt it was time to get involved in some meaningful way.
My name is Ivo Ivanov. I'm 22 years old, and I study games development in Glasgow Caledonian University. The reason why I chose to do this debate is because I think feminism is a very global phenomenon that's happening just now, and I think everyone should be aware of what it is and how it's being portrayed in modern media, and even if they don't take part of it, they should at least have a good understanding of what is happening and what it's fighting for and what it's all about.
Fighting for women's rights has become synonymous with men hating.
Just an individual thing. You know, some women would say men should not be involved in anything to do with liberation. others would be more inclusive. So I guess it's more individual.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that's, I feel like, the main reason why feminism has changed so much, because there's so many different even types of feminism, different people who are considered feminists by themselves, but are fighting for a different thing. And specifically, modern day feminism is not, the majority of it is actually oppressing men and taking away their rights, rather than allowing women to have more rights and be equal, because they talk about equality, but they don't really fight for equality. They're wanting to put them down in a way.
Yeah, but that's a specific group of feminists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the typical, I guess, meaning of feminists. If you type it in any social media, it shows up as angry lesbians who hate men, but this is not all feminists.
From my point of view, the meaning behind feminism is like equality. So like I agree with you in the sense that some men are just like, okay, like I'm not stepping down for women, but on the other part, I don't think that women are asking them to do that. They're just asking for like equal rights, equal pay and so on.
I'm Anik Bechua. I'm a graphic design student at Glasgow Caledonian University, and I'm also working full-time. I decided to take part in this debate because I'm currently working on a motion graphic about sexism and feminism in our everyday life.
My name is Ludovica Maria Muttini. I'm 22-year-old and I study journalism. I decided to participate in this debate about feminism because I believe it is a very current and relevant topic, and I feel more people should talk about it and discuss it.
If I was the opposite sex, my life would be easier.
No. As a guy, I'm very much aware that the other sex has it a lot worse than me. In most respects, actually, biologically, men have it easier than women. It's just a fact that no childbirth, no periods, menopause, etc. And the list can go on and on. And in the social sense, men are not expected to get married at 30. A woman has to get her life in order pretty early compared to men. So I would say I'm glad I'm a guy.
Yeah, not in a negative way, but I do believe that women, social standards for women are just so much higher than men, and it's been like that forever, to be honest. So I don't think that if I was women, I'd have to be easier. I feel like it would be a lot harder.
All men are aware of what's happening and why are you luckier than us in that sense, like again, biologically and in a social aspect.
From my point of view and my experience of like being a woman, I like it. I wouldn't be a man.
Yeah.
I like to be a man.
Absolutely.
Like I'm happy I am who I am, and yeah.
So
Domestic labor exists in 21st century.
I feel like people in the past were so used to just like getting home, getting home, having the children, just quiet, cook dinner, everything is washed, dishes are done, ready, everything is on the table. So this mentality is still with some men, I would say, still. But hopefully new generations hopefully going to succeed in this
from personal experience and when I'm looking at people that I know, it is changing towards that. It is changing from men moving away from this stereotypical thinking of being the guy and this woman in the house, which definitely is a good thing.
I think men are doing it more than they used to, and they're starting to find out, yes, they are involved in, the keeping of the house as well as the women. So it's getting more equal. It's not quite there yet, but I'd say within our lifetime we will see an equal playing field in domestic labour.
Male privilege exists.
In the Western society, which I think these questions are stemming from, I would say yes, it does exist to an extent, but I think that level has been exaggerated for political gain in some areas. To get these quotas, enforced into certain industries, and the positive discrimination against certain men simply because they're men, which is, I think, is a step too far. But yeah, I would say it does exist.
No, I definitely agree.
Different levels.
It is on different levels. The one main point that you were saying is that the whole authority that a man is bringing, or the whole acceptance that men are more authoritative than women, and they can resolve certain issues again, a specific thing better than women, and it's only when a man steps in that could happen. That's one thing that I'm looking at as a male privilege, but it definitely exists. It's not everywhere, though. As you said, it's not everywhere because, again, as we were saying, women and men are trying to get to be more equal. So that would mean that all of the things that men are considered to be able to do, women can also do that as well.
Women are choosing jobs that pay less.
I don't agree with that. Like everybody's choosing a job for passion, for what they like, what their attitudes and skills are, and regardless of how much they are paid and how much, is the wage, they're gonna choose it anyway, whether it's a woman or whether it's men.
I would have to disagree to a certain extent with this, because the way I look at it is sometimes men would have to leave away the pleasure, in terms of the pleasure that they find with their job, if it's not a well-paying job, in order to get a actually well-paying job to support the family, because that is one social pressure towards men, which is supporting for the family. Even though equality is a thing and women should be making the same amount of money than men, there are still situations where men are looked at as being the ones that provide for the family.
I'd say women do have argumentative rights, and they can fight to get a better job, and they can get promotions, and legally they got the same rights as men in Western societies anyway. But again, I guess it depends on the situation and class. You know, if you're in poverty, you will take a job, despite how well it does pay. It's just to make ends meet, especially if you've got children. And women have that social pressure to care for the children, so they're going to choose a job, no matter how dirty or bad it is, to care for that child or children.
Even in the first world countries, there's a study in the USA that women are earning 85 cents compared to $1 an hour on meals.
I'm guessing, yes, to a certain extent, but
again, it depends on the profession you have. So
if it's taking the medium between all women working and all men working, then there can see a difference. But if it's taking into consideration all women working in the same environment, and then there's a difference, then that's a big thing. Then you could say that's a massive big deal, because if they're doing the same jobs and they're doing the same job positions and they're getting paid less, that would be completely unfair. In my opinion, that would be
Well, the only thing I think it's right to say is that women are perhaps more keen to take jobs that are paid less. For example, in schools, like teaching positions, like it's an environment with more women compared to men, and it's a job that is not as well paid as it should be. So that's an example. But I mean, if somebody has a passion for teaching, it's, again, like regardless of the pay.
Women can use their sexuality in everyday scenarios.
I agree.
unfortunately.
I personally have experienced that myself, so I can say yes to that. Now, again, not all women, it's an individual thing. Some people would stoop to that level of using their physical ways to get what they want, but many will not. Again, it's an individual way. Women are capable of doing it, but that does not mean they will.
I think they do use their sexuality, and there is nothing wrong with it. You can use it into your favor, and it's a way of persuading somebody. Yeah, like even men can do it. Like there are certain skills, like your body language or the way you use your voice, the way you act, and women are, I think, naturally good at it.
I don't agree. I'm actually really scared of being portrayed like this. at work, because it's just so embarrassing and so awkward when people approach you in this manner. It's just not the place. Like, work is not the place to be sexual. It's just not right. Work is not a place. This is where you get paid. This is where you work. This is just, it's supposed to be a safe place.
Men and women need to work together to create equality.
Yeah. Yes, obviously, yes.
Yes.
Why that? Absolutely.
Of course. I don't see much more to add to it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
50% of the population. If you get equality, you have to add the other 50%.
Absolutely.
So yes, it's mathematically a necessity to unite.
It's a global phenomenon. This thing.
Yeah.
It's not. It's everyone is involved in it. As we were saying, like a lot more men are involved in it, and a lot more people are finding out through social media. So of course, it's a big topic that needs to be something that we fight towards together, not separated. That's the whole point of being equal and having equal rights, so we can do all the things that we want to do as equally as possible inside of them, instead of being separated.
Thank you everyone for participating in this respectful debate.
It's a wrap.